Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming out today. So today we have a wonderful program that we've put together for you guys today. This is another entry in our In Your Neighborhood series. QHS seeks to preserve the history of Queens, and that includes the contemporary history. And Queens is alive right now with cultural activity, and we were so fortunate to be able to share it with you today. We were able to head out last night to record the communities in Astoria and in Whitestone, and we thank them for their hospitality that we received there for today's Easter. And we look forward to being able to share this with you. During this program, feel free to ask questions at any time. Just type them into the chat. The chat will be in a little box either down below or to the lower right. You might have to scroll down a little to see it, and you will need a YouTube account in order to pose questions, but it is simple and free to sign up. We look forward to answering any questions that you might have, and we'll have a Q&A section at the end for those who want to have a dedicated time for that. But please enjoy our In Your Neighborhood for the Greek Orthodox Easter ceremony.
What makes a Greek community a Greek community? Well, there are several main factors. One is the sense of family. Greek people tend to have large families that are very close. They live within close proximity to each other. And basically the life of the average Greek American is very similar. There is a baptism when you are young. There is Greek school, where you go during your grade school years to learn religious studies as well as the Greek language and history. That is why the majority of the Greek community is bilingual in, of course, both Greek and in English. And also there are other shared similarities as well amongst the people here in New York City, specifically in Queens, and that is the sense of cultural things like hangouts, like the Café Neo or the cafe, where people go to see others and be seen. There is also the food element. Greeks tend to eat at home. They shop at places like Titan Foods or the Greek Mediterranean store, and that sells products that are imported from Greece and other delicacies. But when it's time to go out and have a meal on the outside, I think Greeks tend to be very picky about where they eat, especially if it's going to be Greek food. It has to be of very top quality and made to their liking. One of these places, I guess, in Astoria would be Taverna Kos, which sells excellent fried fish, calamari, octopodi or octopus, and bacalhau, which is also excellent, as well as horta, a steamed vegetable dish, which is very, very delicious. These are very common things that are shared experiences in the Greek community. For the youth, there were many Greek nightclubs, especially in Astoria years ago in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and these were major, major spots to go to party, to enjoy music, club music, or bazooki music, bazookia, as they call it. And these places could get very rowdy and go into the wee hours of the night. But that, of course, in this time period in which we live in, is a element of the Greek cultural landscape that is fading away. And to give a general overview, of Greeks in Astoria and Whitestone, we begin with the history. Greek people originally came to New York hundreds of years ago, as early back as the time of the Revolution. The so-called modern-day Greek community can trace its origins back to the early 20th century. It was here in Lower Manhattan where so many immigrants came from distant shores that the Greek people settled. But this was not for long. The Greeks would then travel uptown to communities like Morningside Heights and specifically Washington Heights, where today there is still a Greek Orthodox Church, although the community has changed from Greek Orthodox to Hispanic starting around the 1960s. From there, the Greeks traveled further north still into the Bronx and settled on the Grand Concourse and in other parts of the North and Western Bronx. After World War II, with the coming of the Triborough Bridge and greater economic opportunity, the Greeks moved yet again and came south over the Triborough into the borough of Queens, settling naturally in Astoria, the first destination one reaches in Queens coming over the Triborough. The Greek community built up slowly, starting in the late 40s, all the way through the 80s and 90s. After the early 90s, the Greek community started to move yet again. After living in Astoria for over half a century, Greeks started moving into neighboring towns such as Bayside, East Flushing, of course Whitestone in the 1980s, and naturally even more east from there into Nassau County and Suffolk County. The Greeks who originally lived in the Bronx and in Astoria were able, after years of hard work, to purchase real estate, which in those days in the areas of Western Queens and in the Bronx was cheap, much cheaper than it is obviously today. With the economic prosperity of the 1990s, a lot of this property was sold off or rented, and the Greeks were able to move to other neighborhoods, including Whitestone, as I mentioned, Bayside, Douglaston, and then east into Nassau County in areas like Comac, Huntington, and further east into Suffolk County. A lot of the Greeks who came here started work as laborers. In the early 20th century, the Greeks were involved in all sorts of enterprises, but labor was the number one. Working as ditch diggers, as mason, bricklayer, cement pourer, or as carpenter or painter, like my father did when he came to this country in the late 1960s. The Greeks also, by the 1920s and 30s, got involved famously enough, in the diner business. Queens was home to many famous diners, including, when I was growing up, the Scobie Diner in Little Neck, the Seville Diner, and the Saravin Diner in Flushing. These diners were staples of the community for decades and are very fondly remembered by people who live. Okay, so welcome to beautiful Astoria. We're standing here in front of the historic St. Demetrius Church, next door to the St. Demetrius Greek American School of Astoria, right here off of 31st Street in the heart of Astoria. So here we are on Saturday afternoon, and on the eve of Easter Sunday. We're going to be doing a lot of locations today of Greek history in Queens. And what I have here is a gorgeous tsoureki bread from Titan grocery that we just saw earlier with the egg inside. We're going to be enjoying this, Jaron and I, after the broadcast. This amazing holiday Easter bread is somewhat similar to the vasilopita that one has in the Greek culture during the Christmas and New Year holiday, except with that bread there is a coin hidden inside for good luck. So, with our tsoureki bread in front of the beautiful Agios Demetrios Church here in Astoria, we'd like to wish you a happy Easter and on to our next location. During Easter, it is traditional to paint eggs or Easter eggs. In the Greek Orthodox religion, the eggs are simply painted red. The eggs in Greek Orthodox Easter have the same meaning as it does in the Catholic Easter, which is a symbol of new life and rebirth. It is a tradition for Greeks on Easter to take an egg and tap the egg of a family member or friend, and whoever egg remains uncracked supposedly will have good fortune in the coming year. Greek Orthodoxy originated during the 1st century AD and originated in the area of where Greece is situated and including the Balkan area, which is northeast of Greece, on the border of the Middle East. Greek Orthodoxy and the Greek Orthodox Easter comes after the Catholic Easter. They are on 2 separate calendars. This year, the time between the Catholic Easter and the Greek Orthodox Easter was almost a month apart, and this happens, I believe, every 4 years, according to the Greek Orthodox calendar. The way that the holiday is celebrated, interestingly enough, differs depending upon where you are in the world. In the Middle East, it is celebrated pretty much how it is here in the United States, with a midnight mass followed by a day-long feast that occurs following the candlelit vigil. In Greece, there are many different displays of Easter celebration across the country. In the northern part of Greece, huge fires are created in the shape of a cross so that they can be seen from the air. And in the island of Corfu, where my family originates from, Easter Sunday is celebrated in a very, very unique style, with a very unique tradition. At noon on Easter Sunday, every window in Corfu town, in the city of Corfu, opens up, and from every window is thrown a clay pot that is specially designed for the Easter celebration. The pots are thrown out of the windows of every home and every apartment building and fall to the cobblestone street with a thunderous crash. These clay pots are very thin and fragile and are made specifically for the Easter holiday. And if you look on YouTube, there are videos of this Easter celebration in Corfu Island where for about 10 minutes there is a thunderous crash that echoes through the city as thousands of these pots are thrown from the window to the streets below. For those of you who do not know, traditionally I go by the name of Jason D. Antos, A-N-T-O-S. However, my birth name is Andonopoulos, Antonopoulos. Greek names were shortened here in the United States because they are obviously very long, containing numerous letters, and Greek people changed these names to sound a little bit less ethnic because of certain stereotypes or prejudices that might have existed 100 years ago. And in some cases, they were shortened just for the sake of being easier to write. My middle name is Demetrius, for that was the name of my grandfather. Our name, Andonopoulos, which ends in Poulos, Poulos, comes from the island of Peloponnesos, from the Peloponnesian Islands. It was my great-great-grandfather who traveled from Peloponnesos via the merchant marines to Corfu, where he received a job as a lighthouse keeper in a small island north of Corfu, the island of Othoni, Othoni, which is the most northwestern territory in all of Greece. It is situated just a couple of miles from the Albanian border in the middle of the Ionian Sea. And from that time period on, my family has lived in the Corfu Othoni region, which is in the Ionian section of the northwestern territory of Greece, approximately 50 miles across from Bari, Italy. My father came here in 1968 via the merchant marines, the Greek merchant marines, where he landed in the port of New York on December 30th, 1968. He was received there by his family, by cousins who had moved here prior, and they took him to their home, to their apartment in Astoria, near Astoria Boulevard, overlooking the Grand Central Parkway. And that is where he began his journey as a Greek American, or I should say a Greek immigrant, here in America. The midnight mass that we are witnessing celebrates the beginning of the Easter Sunday holiday and marks the beginning of the day that Christ resurrected. It is celebrated by a midnight mass that happens outside of Greek Orthodox churches all across America and all across the world. It is a candlelit ceremony where the priest talks about the resurrection and gives the blessing of Christos Anesti, or Christ is risen, to which the response is Alithos Anesti, which means truly he has risen. After the candlelit ceremony, families usually return home after the ceremony to engage in a small feast, which then is continued, of course, later Sunday in the afternoon with the traditional dinner and an abundance of Greek food. Everything from the traditional lamb, which is made on a rotisserie, and also other Greek delights like moussaka, pasticcio, and of course wonderful pastries like baklava and kalaktabouriko. The candles featured at the ceremony of the midnight mass are called lambada. Lambada. And these traditional candles are held high and make the sign of the cross as the priest recites the prayer at 12 midnight to mark the beginning of the Easter holiday. For more information on the history of Greeks, specifically in Queens, we ask you to purchase the wonderful book, The Greeks in Queens, by Christina Roseas. This wonderful pictorial history chronicles the history of the Greek people in Queens, going as far back as the late 1800s, and is available at Barnes & Noble, on Amazon, and even here at the Queens Historical Society. For those of you interested in purchasing this wonderful book, we invite you to email us at queenshistorical.org.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming out today. So, all right. So thank you, Jason, for hosting that wonderful program for us. Don't forget to unmute yourself. Jason, are you still there? Unmute yourself.
Hello.
There we go. So, we just finished watching our. We got some echo going on. One sec.
Hosting that wonderful program for us.
Jason, can you pause the video? There we go. All right. So if anybody has any questions about the Greeks in Astoria or Whitestone or Queens in general, now is the time for you to ask us any questions. Jason is quite familiar with the community, so I'm sure he would be able to answer some of those questions. Trying to think of a couple of questions of my own.
Jaron, I'll let you go ahead. I'm sorry.
I know that the festivities usually involve a parade. Can you describe what that is, what that looks like on a regular basis, and where people can go and see those?
Well, sometimes there is a small procession. I know in Whitestone years ago they used to do it, and they would march the icon of Christ down the road. The priest would lead the way naturally, and the people would follow with the candles. So this is a very common thing. You don't technically see it in New York a lot. It's pretty much a stationary type of ceremony that we observe last night.
And besides Whitestone, where else can you find this ceremony in Queens?
You could find it in Astoria, at the church by the elevated train that we saw. Okay, St. Demetrius. And then there's also on 192nd Street in Flushing on Northern Boulevard.
Okay.
At the Greek Orthodox Church there's also a major midnight ceremony as well. So there's 3 places where you could catch it on Easter at midnight mass.
And I know you mentioned a feast after the ceremony.
Yeah.
Would there be a public feast as well, or would this be something intimate with family members?
Intimate with family.
Okay. I know you started mentioning a question.
Oh no, I know that you had mentioned to me that last night was your first time.
Yes.
Observing it. What were your thoughts? What did you think?
Well, it's been quite a long time since I've been to a religious ceremony, but it was very interesting. It was great to see a community kind of be able to congregate, especially during this time when we've been socially isolated for so long. Thankfully, with vaccinations going as they are, it's more possible to share these moments with each other, and it was very interesting to see how everybody is participating. I didn't see very many people out there that weren't already in the know who were ready and able to participate.
And it was they were very lucky that the weather held up. And
Yes.
if you notice, it was very windy most of the day, but the moment the ceremony started, it was complete calm. And then when the ceremony ended, the wind started up again.
Yes, it did.
Very, very interesting.
All right. So it doesn't look like we have any questions right now, but if anybody has any questions, if they're rewatching this later, just shoot us an email. Jason, where can people reach you?
I can be reached at jasonantos@aol.com. So that's JASONANTOS@AOL.com.
All right. So people can forward you any questions they might have.
Absolutely.
We also have more programs coming up at the Queens Historical Society. May is going to be a very busy month for us. So if you come back next week or are interested in doing a program next week, we're going to be partnering with the Brooklyn Public Library for our Culture Pass programs. We'll be running It's Electric, A History of Computers, in both English and in Mandarin. We'll be doing the week after that, on the 15th, Airfare, The History of Airports in Queens, in English and Spanish. And then on the 22nd, we have one of our bigger new programs coming up, our Step into Queens program, where we'll be taking a look inside of 5 historic houses across Queens. I'm looking very much forward to that. We'll have more programs and more information on our website, queenshistoricalsociety.org. So feel free to head over there if you have any questions. But other than that, thank you guys for coming out today, and hope to see you next week.
Thank you, guys.